Hi everyone, welcome to Sunday, I guess the 8th of November, and I'm going to share some information today on shamans, a group of people that we probably need very much right now, that the world can require the shamans come back into the forefront now before it's too late. And this talk has kind of come out of the healing videos that I did the last few days ago, which I will at the end talk about the shamanic initiation illness, just in case that happening to the 1 in 100,000 people who are watching this, so they know what it is and what it's not. But that, along with some other information, it's important to know what a shaman actually is and what it's not, because the word is thrown around a lot, particularly in the Western spiritual marketplace. And you need to have a better idea of what it really is and what it's not, which is usually what's presented on the internet and through books. So I want to talk a bit about that. This comes out of there's a small bit of it made it into the Falling for Truth book. It made it into an appendix, a little bit about shamans, and I'll read a bit on that. But I have this book which is 300 and some pages. It was originally around 600 pages, and a lot of it had to be chopped off. And actually, what's interesting is a lot of the stuff that has come on that has had the most response of the videos that I've done. Things like Plato's Cave and a few other things are things that were part of the original 600-page book, which I took out because I was told it had to be down in half, and so I needed around a 300-page book, so 300 pages had to go. But I'm seeing a lot of what was in the 300 pages is actually extremely valuable information, and so I might recreate the book back to its entirety, back to its 600-page complete form. So yeah, I might do that over the Christmas holiday. Take a week or two and just produce it in its complete form. Anyway, let's talk about shamans. And again, we're going to start with quite a long description of at least what I feel, what they are and what they aren't. So we need to begin that. My book, the appendix that was in the book began with a story of where I met a man in Palenque. So maybe I should just read the whole chapter with some additions, and we'll add the initiation illness from there. So I'm sitting at a table in the back of a series of apartments in the north part of the Mexican town of Palenque. I'm here with Chris Powell, an American archaeologist and lead investigator of the team digging into the cross group at the ancient Mayan site of the same name. We've struck up a connection based on what we've both been looking for as aspects of greater knowledge in the past than the standard books and histories present. Chris had given me a tour of their latest work, and we'd made it back to the courtyard behind the apartments where the archaeology team stays and are sipping on a drink, chatting about Palenque's symbolic connections. The third member of our group is a local Mayan man of about 65. He hasn't said all that much, particularly to me. As Chris and I shared some various ideas about the nature of time, the old man turned to face me and said very clearly, "There was no time here before the white people." I heard him, and Semi continued with the conversation, but at the same time something inside was rebelling. What does that mean? No time before the white people? Because there were no clocks? They didn't know the exact time of day? No, that's not what he was referring to, for such a comment would have not fit in with the conversation. Was he really saying that there was actually no time? About an hour later, our chat was finished. The old man patted me on the back, wished me well, and walked off. He never gave any further explanation of what he said, like a Zen master dropping a cone on me and then leaving me with the rest of my life to deal with it. That was my first meeting with someone shaman-like. It still shocks me when I go to a shaman website on the internet and see, for example, the main photo of the group of practitioners, a bunch of middle-aged white people wearing ponchos they bought in New Mexico, beads from Sedona, and holding a rattle that they bought in a store with a name like Buddha's breath. It is now fashionable in the Western spiritual world to claim to be a shaman. Take some workshops, get a certificate, claim some native heritage, and then start giving drumming classes and building sweat lodges. We have a world full of pseudo-shamans, playing games of power to fool white people for money and prestige. The word shaman is a rather mixed-up term anyway. It is a Siberian word for a very specific type of person in their tribal culture. The name can be translated directly as ghost talker or night walker. White academics standardized this word to indicate any man or woman of traditional culture involved in utilizing healing, medicine, journeying, spirit contacts, divination, prayer, ceremony, or using songs for the ascertainment of a patient's trouble or finding a healing cure. Today, the word shaman has come to represent a lot of things, but it is a very specific word for me. To me, it does not mean someone who is a smart native Indian, but something which many wise native men and women became. People of all traditions, including the original white tradition, reached what that word embodies, but that was mostly a long time ago. When I look out there today, just about anyone using the word to describe themselves as a shaman probably isn't. The few that are really our shamans stay unnoticed. And yet, how did the real ones truly get to become labeled a shaman? One of it was to be pushed to the brink of death or beyond. They fell into an illness or madness so unbearable that the only way they could stop it was to become a shaman. I'm sitting on a park bench in downtown Ottawa, waiting for someone I've never met. His name is Roberto, and he is from Brazil. This was early in my study of native Indian medicine traditions. When I was back in town visiting some friends, I decided to call a few of the people in a local spiritual magazine listing themselves as shamans. I met one yesterday, and she was the typical white-looking New Age type who had become a shaman after a few months in a workshop. We talked for about 30 minutes over coffee when she finally said to me, "I'm sorry, I don't think I can talk to you anymore. I don't really have understanding of any of the things you're asking or discussing. It is beyond me. But I did meet someone last week that might be more of help to you. He's here from Brazil. This is his number." I appreciated her honesty that she recognized she was not at a place where she could discuss things with me. And today I was on the bench, waiting. When he arrives, he's not much of what I was picturing. Roberto is your typical looking, dark-skinned, 50-ish guy in khakis and long-sleeve shirt. After buying him a coffee, he tells me that his daughter is married and living in the country, and he's trying to move to Canada as well. He starts to tell me some of what he was taught over the years about trees, and how they communicate with each other, and how we can talk to them. He has me perform some basic tree-talking exercises. After about 2 hours together, he begins to tell me his story of how he became to learn, and I'm only going to paraphrase this briefly so as to not lose his personal power in his experience. His grandfather was the healer of his village when Roberto was a boy, and when it was his time to learn as a teenager, he had no interest. So his grandfather walked him into the jungle, into a cave. From there, he threw the teen into a deep lake. Roberto realized that in the lake were all sorts of creatures. One that he instantly knew was a crocodile. He screamed for his grandfather's help, but Roberto was told to stay in there until his fear was gone. Every time he tried to climb out, he was pushed back in. He finally began to recognize that he was going to die. And then he remembered a crocodile that he had met as a young boy and had thrown rocks at for no reason. He wondered about that. And since he was going to die anyway, he thought he should apologize to this one in the lake. On that thought, he was bumped, and he could sense the creature. It was talking to him about his stone throwing, and he talked with it until he felt he was forgiven, and he felt it swim away. This happened over and over again with various creatures, from snakes to fish to insects. After several hours, he had spoken to most of the animal kingdom and issued apologies for all of his previous acts and for ignoring them. Then his grandfather pulled him out. Roberto said at that point he felt better than he ever had in his life, and after that his teaching could begin. This sort of intensity of practice, of putting one at the cross of death to create a learning door, was not forgotten by me. I took a part of his story with me always. At the end of our meeting, I asked if I could give him some money for our time, and he laughed. "You know very well I can't accept your money," he said. "Anything real is not something you pay for. It is a sharing. I didn't pay my grandfather, so you don't have to pay me." "But I should give you something," I said. "You were very good for my spirit today." "You did," he said. "You bought me this coffee. And you helped me to see that there were a few white people in this country who might be interested in these stories. That is good for my spirit." An entire white spiritual marketplace has been created, taught through various organizations and workshops, with a few borrowed practices and ideas from all over the world and stamped by the modern name shamanism. What is found in these white workshops, though, while of some value, I do have to admit, some of it does have some useful value. It is not the practices done in traditional native ceremony. I had read book after book written by these shamans on the marketplace, and it wasn't until I finally started going on the reserves to the various native sweat lodges to see that I could see a link, I could see a connection of where these books might have sort of been writing from, but it's nothing at all the way the native tradition was actually done and practiced on the reserve in its natural form. They're not the same at all. In fact, most of the people marketing these things as shamans are more or less slapping the face of the ancient wise men and women who spent and sacrificed their life to learn a knowledge to keep their village safe. The white spiritual marketplace exists today because whites have lost their spiritual heritage. The great indigenous practices of early Europe, exemplified by power spots, stone circles, labyrinths, and the Hermetic tradition, was symbolically destroyed when a new group took over and the religion of Christianity swept everything out. Books were burned, bodies were burned, and ancient sites were destroyed. It's the same as to any traditional culture worldwide, be they Lakota, Maya, Aboriginal, Bantu. Rounded up, tortured, and killed. Yet some in these cultures went through untold sacrifices to keep some of their culture alive. Many hid in the forests or the mountains where they could not be found. And their incredible courage and their tenacity to keep the wisdom alive is one of the reasons any bit of tribal culture continues today. Yet even in the natural traditional cultures, there's very little interest in this heritage, either being seduced by the lure of the money of the white world or in such a state of poverty and hopelessness that the white system is pushed upon them that the actual tradition is almost gone. In fact, the medicine man that I spent time with, Bruce, on the Sutina Reserve, when I was there, he was the last of his entire tribe that knew their language completely. And often there were younger people coming. They would be sitting with him for hours, a couple hours a day, just to transcribe all of the words of the language, because when he died, the complete language would die with him. And they had to make as complete a dictionary as possible while he was still alive. That's how much of the tradition is gone. And in fact, he used to tell me, I'm going, obviously it's not in my book now, I'm just sharing. He used to tell me sometimes in the sweat, well, not sometimes, told me once, that whatever was going on in the sweat lodge now, that whatever him and the other medicine people were doing and the practices we were doing, that the power which to me seemed incredible and unbelievably strong, to him was very weak compared to what he called the ancestors, the people that were here 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, before the destruction of the culture. He said what they could do now was just a small piece of what they could do thousands of years ago. And I think that's the same in just about any tradition. I mean, I've been reading some books on alchemists lately, due to some journey information I had on some recent journeys. And again, you pick up the book. It doesn't matter whether it's Vicino or any alchemist. And you pick it up, and automatically, just on reading it, there's a power being transferred just in reading the book. Never mind trying to understand what's being presented, just the book itself. has a tremendous power, and that power has been placed in it by the person who wrote it. You know, I don't, maybe there's a tiny bit in my book, maybe, if I'm lucky, but these books are different. You almost wouldn't have to read them. My guess is you could just hold, if you could get an original, you could just hold it, and some of the power and knowledge would suck into you like by osmosis. We've lost a lot of that. We've lost almost all of that. Thankfully, not totally. There are still some of these people around. The best way to test if someone today really is a shaman is to find out how much they've sacrificed to become what they are now. Have they really tasted their own death? Or have they just played a game of denial, projection, and distraction their entire life, which is now carrying on in a new role? A quote from a writer named Lomel Edwards in The World of the Early Hunter. Unlike the medicine man, the shaman's adoption of his or her profession in many cases was not voluntary. The future shaman's experience of being called serves frequently to consist of a compulsive state from which they see no other means of escape except to shamanize. It is often clear that the one who is to become a shaman consciously does not want to do so at all, but is forced to do it by the spirits, which drive them deeper and deeper into despair and illness, from which they can find no way out but death or the assumption of the office of the shaman. New Age white people read the books, decided they wanted to be shamans, an entire modern system was created. As again, like I said, what is found in these workshops, while of some value, is not the practices done in traditional native ceremony. A great documentary called White Shamans, Plastic Medicine Men might still be found on YouTube and presents the depths of delusion people will sink into believing they are shamans. Being a medicine person or tribal wisdom holder was not a career or a business. The medicine person was needed. People got sick, and it was their job to get them well again, while being sure that the right conditions for overall survival for the entire tribe were set up to find and grow food and to avoid serious weather in advance. They could not be involved in spiritual games. They had to succeed, or the entire tribe would die off. Just because they did not have hospitals, EKG machines, or Demerol tablets did not mean their methods did not work. They did. If you're looking for a book, I can recommend none more highly than the book Fool's Crow, Wisdom and Power by Thomas Mayles. The shaman was the one who had seen firsthand how dangerous and cruel this reality can be, and seemingly chosen had the task of bringing a small bit of sanity into an insane reality. To be a real medicine person required training, sacrifice, and constant vigilance. It was still a calling that was in a sense but it was still a calling that in one sense could be taught via a lineage. What might be called a shaman was different. The shaman did not get there due to their grandparents or from wanting to, which is why the shaman usually came from another path altogether. Or even if they were a medicine person, they were likely a failed medicine person first. The shaman's life before being a shaman is usually riddled with failure, until they found the only thing they are not failing at, being a shaman. For on the surface, the shaman and a good healer will seem the same. But there's a different air to what the shaman does, due to touching emptiness, due to the crossing of death that has occurred. One might say that a shaman is someone who's gone past their religion, past their culture, past their beliefs. In fact, they died to standard reality. Thus there are shamans of every tradition: Chinese, Cherokee, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, even simple bus drivers. But each will be colored by their previous experience and pathways. Just as awakening is similar, the expression of it will be unique. A splash of emptiness touches everything the shaman does. Even if to outward appearances they act like other people around them. He or she was seen as more of a healer of souls, one who had gone through so much that they were respected and feared equally. It's not a profession, or sometimes done with other things in your life. Being chosen by the spirits to become a shaman means your normal life as a normal person is all but over. It often begins as a child, either with serious illness or when overcoming some overwhelming traumatic experience forces them to turn inwards. And from this crack, the whole unconscious opens, and the potential new shaman falls into it. Almost no one who became a shaman just had the process show up at 31. It's been acting on them their whole life. and most must deal with a difficult period known as the Shamanic Initiation Illness, where they are on the brink of death for perhaps years. There's two things I want to share now, one story, and then I will share the shamanic illness. One is the story of how even the medicine people on the reserves are quite feared by the rest of the people on the reserve. In my days when I was training with Bruce, I didn't have a car, so I had to take the bus right close to the reserve. You could take the bus in Calgary up to the edge of where the reserve starts, and then his was a long walk. I usually had to walk like 30 minutes down a road to get to his house for the sweat lodges. And I was doing this one day, and some other native men halfway down were clearing some trees, or they were doing some work in a field area. And one of them turns around and yells back at me like, "Hey, not a walking trail. White people go up into the mountains. This is a reserve." You know, and they were looking a bit menacing. And, you know, they wanted to get me off their property, you might say. And I just said, "Oh, I'm just walking up to Bruce Starlight's for a sweat lodge." They immediately turned around like I was a ghost. They turned around like I was a ghost and went back to working, and like hoping I didn't notice them, hoping that they just disappeared. And it was I walked the rest of the way to Bruce's house. It was this realization of like, they're terrified of him. Obviously, if they probably got really sick or somebody in their family was sick, they might go see him, but under no circumstances, without their exact need of him, did they even want him in their mind, in their thoughts. That's how terrified they were of this unknown power that they themselves, of course, had obviously rejected in their own life, didn't want that part of their tradition, but were still afraid of it. So let me share the Shamanic Initiation Illness for you. Now I'm going to read you my notes on this experience, on this tradition. And I'm reading it because while it sounds like a regular illness someone can have, it's nowhere close to it. However, I don't want to read this and have you out there thinking that this is you. Okay, I want to be very clear on this, that there may be elements of this that seem like connects to perhaps a story you're having if you're going through illness or difficulty. Don't initially think it's a shamanic initiation illness. It's more highly likely to be elements of your past, trauma in your experience, your challenges in your life journey. It's something more. It's something more that you need to go to a shaman to get help with, not necessarily that you are a shaman. This is probably 1 in 50,000, 1 in 100,000 possibility. However, there could be one person out there who is going through this, or who knows somebody who is going through this, and this may be of help to you. So that's why I'm still going to share it, but I don't want you to, please don't instantly take this in as if this is me. It might be you, but probably not. But I just want to read it to you now anyway. Quote from Wallace Black Elk, Lakota shaman. "Everyone who is called by the spirits gets the sickness, a bad sickness. Many wonder what it means to become a shaman. Many shamans as children had to overcome serious illness or great difficulty, where they learned how to heal themselves. But mostly the call comes later, when the spirits will deal with a huge psychological or physical illness until the individual finally surrenders to shamanism. The illness, called the Shamanic Initiatory Crisis, is a marker of passage, of death and rebirth scenario on a grand scale. The shamanic sickness is rarely talked about because few of those who write the books and give lectures on the subject have actually gone through it. This illness challenge can last months or most likely years. Some say that the longer the sickness lasts, the stronger the shaman will be, assuming that they do not die in the process, which does happen. Usually the shaman during the illness is always asking, why is this happening to me? The illness is usually impossible for any in the medical community to diagnose, be they Western, be they alternative. Nothing seems to make the illness any better. But deep down, the one that's going through it knows the cure. Surrender to the spirit. Usually he or she will resist as long as possible, doing everything to find a place in the world, yet each attempt at normalcy will lead nowhere. From a Yalut shaman, Yuno Harva. In the end, I became so ill that I was close to death. So I began to shamanize, and very soon my health improved. Even now I feel unwell and sick whenever I am avoiding my shamanism duties for a longer period of time. The shaman sickness is a long, slow, agonizing process, not a weekend epiphany, and knowing that can help someone to relax some of the burden of the depression that will come with it. The best tools are patience and devotion. There are blockages in the pre-shaman's energy system that have to be blown out before they can take the next step, and that can produce psychological breaks, despair, odd sexual patterns, volatile emotions, insomnia, or illness as these blocks are brought to the surface. Everything you've ever thought about yourself is going to be overturned, and fighting it will just lengthen it. Someone can do some horrendous and stupid things during this time. You can be a source of bad luck and bad vibes to everyone around you. Your life during this can completely fall apart. You can lose your job, your home, your family, your friends, everything. You can wind up so destitute that you may wind up living on the street. Or you might keep everything but your health as you lay sick in bed, day after day, month after month, year after year. Still, you have to surrender it. One thing that this illness, either physical or mental, creates is isolation. And it is in this isolation and aloneness which helps the conditioning to get burned off. In the shamanic illness, we need to be alone to really see all that is within that we have been hiding from, the light stuff as well as the dark stuff. Some will just go into a forest or cave alone where they talk to no one. Others will sleep a great deal. On a website that I don't know if it even exists anymore, known as the Shaman's Cave, it was around 15 years ago, wrote this very poignant, quite long description of the path to a shaman. Again, I'm reading this to you because I want you to understand that the ones who really have become this, the ones who are really able to interact with the spirits in this world in a way that's beyond what anyone else can fathom or think, have had to go through a semi-nightmare to reach that ability, to reach the ability where they can use it properly and not be using it to foster their own needs, their own gains, their own goals, to make themselves better, more important, richer, stronger, happier. They've had to get to a place where all that is burned out of them so that they can just be of service to those who come needing help, or in larger cases to a tribe or community. So this is what the Shaman's Cave website had to say. Let me outline what is going to happen to you if you get a real call for a shaman. You will have no friends. They will shun you because you scare them now. They will tell you that you are insane. You will experience love at its core, so intense and selfless, but you will never have anyone in your life to share it with. Your family will become strangers to you. Everything you own will be taken away. You will live in some sense in constant pain, alone. You will truly become a wounded healer. People will treat you like a dime store psychic. Now your spark is becoming a tiny flame, and the bad stuff starts. Visions you can't control, illnesses that are serious yet seem to have no cause or cure. You'll become depressed, a depression so deep and dark you feel as though you're eating your own soul. Your tiny flame is growing into a small fire, and the real trouble starts. Spatial lapses, missing time, time distortions, and things that go bump in the night. Your awareness begins to grow, but what is in that awareness provides no comfort. New creatures will enter your world, not all of them nice. In fact, some will try to kill you. You will feel naked against the full force of the ancient energies. Something is driving you at this point. You no longer feel in control of anything. Fear will seize you. This isn't normal fear, but the kind of fear that steals your breath and stops your heart. People will become transparent to you. When you see them, it will be in their totality. You will feel all of their pain, anger, and misery. Not as a casual observer, you will be living it with them in that moment. This is unimaginably horrible, but still somewhere inside a fire rages. Somehow, through all the sweat, blood, misery, and tears, you survive to see beyond yourself and the world. Standing toe-to-toe with death, you slap it in the face and laugh. What appears next in your vision is one golden moment, one instant in a sea of time. You will risk everything for that one chance to stare into the maw of eternity, to see it, to know. Because you are now burning from the fire within. You will leap into the abyss, not so much because you want to, but because you can do no less. But now you carry the name, Shaman. Somewhere I've read they talk about 2 different types of shamanic illness initiation that tends to occur for shamans, for potential shamans. One is called the death road, and that's confronted by illness and through meetings with death. And in fact, they will often go through so many experiences of, I should have died in that moment. A fall, a strike by lightning, a hit by car, or. But each time the nervous system goes haywire. And it's an indication that this process is connected with Hermes, for the hermetic links to the nervous system. And again, the oddest thing of the physical illness is that not only can any type of medicine do anything to improve it, nor alternative healers, and even if it goes away for a while, it will just come back a few months later. Often it's only another shaman who's able to diagnose, explain, and share what is going on with that person. And until the death experiences are fully integrated, which may take years of time, and accept and understand, does the illness finally leave? And again, as mentioned by the shaman from, I believe it's an Inuit shaman, or maybe a Siberian shaman that I mentioned earlier, as soon as they stop being a shaman, the illness returns. And that's how they know that they're not doing their job anymore, and they have to go back to exactly what their practice and their prescribed wisdom is, that the illness for them becomes a marker of, are they doing what they're supposed to do or are they not? A second road that gets mentioned quite often is known as the psychological. And this is more of a madness of the mind. This is more where people will see other realms, hear other realms, see spirits. And again, if a person going through this type of shamanic initiation goes to the medical community, there's a good chance they'll be put in a mental hospital. A good friend around can help keep them somewhat grounded in normal reality, to let them know when they're slipping away from the normal too much. What's interesting is the madness road often has no ending marker. Just one day comes a message that the work is over. The mind, for some reason that no one can explain, the work just stabilizes. There is a third way that I don't remember where I read all this, but it struck me as very clearly honest. But there's a third road called the artistic road, which is a type of death. And this comes to someone who's been living a life totally dedicated to an art or a skill, where their whole identity, their whole source of joy, their whole creativity is placed into this one act. And there comes a moment where they're forced to a position where they must give it up, where they must walk away and never touch it again. And this, of course, will link at the basis of their identity as a person. And this pain will continue until they find that all of that creative energy they poured into their art or their music or their skill or their whatever it was, until it gets poured into being a shaman and used to heal and guide others, find their own creativity, will the pain and inner sense go away. I do know one thing that's very interesting about this is that when you do meet somebody, even after they have become a shaman, even after they've gone through these processes, another person will feel it right away. If it's a person who's gone through a death process, the other people will get will have a certain type of fear around that person. They will, or not all, but so many will feel, because they'll feel the death. That person is walking with the death, and it's not just one death they've had, right? They've touched death many, many, many times in their life. And when you've walked the death road, you will often then come across somebody who instantly feels that they're staring at their own death when they look at your eyes. And instantly they get frightened. And many people will just never want to talk to that person again, because all they feel is this first initial charge of death, and they run away. For someone who's gone the madness route, who's gone that route, and is usually now, they would be more classified as a very dream journey, psychic kind of ability. The person will, of course, people will be afraid of them because they feel unstable around them, or they feel that the other person is unstable. They feel, they don't trust what they're going to do or say. And so that's also something to know, that I've come to notice quite often is how many people, when faced with a true shaman, are instantly afraid. And that's just part of the parcel of, you might say, weeding out who they can work with, who they can train, who's willing to, even though the first time they met them feel some fear, they're willing to come back the next day and begin the healing practice or begin learning from them, that they recognize there's a fear, they don't understand it, but they're still willing to go through it. The reason for all this is because the shaman does not come all the way back. They stay in the particular realm that went through their experience. The trip to madness is really to help those when they come back who will be going through a similar mental issue. The trip to death is to learn how to help those who are getting close to crossing over in their own death or reaching the nothingness of the void as well. The illness is going to change the person totally, and that's the point. The person they were before the shamanic illness essentially dies, and what remains is different, but the old scars and the old memories of that sick time remain. It will define their path and their work from that moment on. The pain, the loneliness, the insecurity, and the fear of the illness time is very hard, and one has to withstand it without letting it crumble you. You have to keep in mind that if you can just get through it, something may come from it. Running from it never helps. All of your garbage is going to come up. Keep your humor, laugh, persevere, love, and keep your will. Pray a lot. Be guarded with saying too much to those around you who will just tell you that you're crazy. Be careful with the modern book internet shamans who have no idea of any of this stuff personally. It is best, if possible, to find someone who already went through this process. They would likely, although they will not be able to help that much, they can at least let you know a process is happening. And you are not the first person to go through it, and this can help your strength, as since others have made it through this, so can we. Most will come to a point where the choice comes to either keep on being sick and die or become a shaman. Even so, a lot won't make that choice until they've finally been broken down into complete and final surrender. But once the shaman fully surrenders and accepts the calling, the illness usually disappears just as mysteriously as it first arrived, leaving behind a cleaned out body and mind that, in the words of Lakota shaman Fool's Crow, is now an empty, hollow tube. Much more integration comes after the illness, and the cleaner the tube, the more powerful they will be. It becomes important not to hold on to what comes into the tube, for if it comes, it must be shared, or the power will stop coming, which is why the cleaning out process is so long and so complete. Because if selfishness remains, then too much of the gifts that come in will be tried to be held on to, rather than be looked on as to how they can share what has come. They had accepted Spirit's call, gone through the hell that was thrown on them, and now they trust the Spirit will constantly provide for what they need. They have let everything that gets in the way of their shamanizing get dropped, be they mundane careers, projects, relationships, it doesn't matter, they're all secondary. If they have them, that is fine, but they will never interfere with their task of service. Being a shaman is their moment-by-moment life. They no longer ask why they are as they are, they do what they do because the option not to do it has been taken away. And while they share as much as they can, they know from experience it is a solitary journey. As no one could walk it for him, they cannot walk it for anyone else. They've had to get to know all parts of reality. From the Nag Hammadi documents, the dialogue of the Savior, if you cannot stand in the darkness, you will not be able to see the light. And the world that they touch can become a world of light, but it comes through the darkness. For if they are going to be called to help someone or something else's darkness, they better have first-hand knowledge of what it's all about. I will read the last chapter, or the last paragraph, I should say, that sits in my book. The shaman, for some internal or external reason, has seemingly been forced to return to the world of people to be of service, to make that understanding available to those around him, and generally, to do this, they stay within the boundaries of their previous religion or spiritual tradition. That is because they prefer to work with the current belief structure of people rather than try to break the structures of everyone, which will create conflict. They may still perform prayer and ceremony, but what they are doing is a deeper level. They would be masters of what Richard Rose called betweenness. Being a shaman means to have come into power, and the greatest power one can find is emptiness. Yet a shaman could not really describe what power is or how they got it. Just one day after all the years of sacrificing, it was there. Again, the best way to test if someone really is a shaman will be to find out how much have they sacrificed for what they are now. Have they really tasted their own death or just played a game of denial? The real shaman is not perfect and not necessarily traveled through the door all the way to truth, but they have managed to look through that door, and they've come back to be of service. And again, they had to constantly battle the deepest, darkest parts of themselves and the world. But it is this constant battle that allows them to be of service to others who are going through their own dark nights. While the village all lived together, including the medicine people, the shaman lived alone. This is an important part. This is an important point. They were part of the group, yet always excluded from it. They have no organization. They are not building programs or making themselves important or rich. They find it hard to charge anything for their service, believing what they've learned is a gift. And if they do go in the modern world to share it, it's usually for a very nominal fee, enough to cover their food and their shelter and their basic needs. They are in between the world of the living and the world of the dead, the world of the physical and the world of the spirit. The best word I can describe what they are is a bridge. And part of accepting the call of the shaman is accepting a call to be of service, usually only seeing people when nothing else has worked for them. To offer themselves, as I say, as a bridge between the world of the physical and the world of the spirit. Or you might even say, if you want to put it in Plato's cave terms, to be standing in the hallway, to be a bridge between those in the cave and that's what's outside the cave. So I've shared that with you today with the hopes that somehow we can all manifest our own inner shamanic gifts, because we have what might be called shaman gifts. We have. It's not just linked only to people known as shamans. We have. Each individual person has smaller versions of these gifts. You might say a smaller shaman or a smaller shamanic-like thing within. And I guess the point of the whole video is hoping that on one level, each person can tap into a little bit more of their own shamanic gift, whatever that is, individually, and grow that in the period we're in now, growing it very quietly and sharing it with those around you, the area you live in. And a reminder that the ones who have truly taken on this name, the ones who truly call it, theirs is a power that we do need now. Theirs is a knowledge that we need now. And so I guess it's a call that more of it will appear for us. More of it will show up, whether it be real people we're able to meet, dreams we have at night, that somehow we can respect the power and the work that's gone into these people taking hold of that knowledge, and the hope that it will share and flow into our current reality. Thanks for your time, for, as always, dropping by, seeing these talks, commenting and sharing and making purchases and donations, and they're always appreciated. And by all means, good luck with what's coming as we hopefully find ways to, even if chaos begins to come, we find ways individually to strengthen ourselves, to center ourselves, to keep ourselves mentally clear, mentally focused, mentally aware to do what we know is the best thing for us now. See you soon.